Hello and welcome to HCB, where today it is the predictions for week 21 of the Premier League. Happy New Year's Eve, everyone. Hope you're enjoying it, and hope you are celebrating the end of the decade very well. I think for us football fans here, the end of the decade is a time to reflect the progress our clubs have made. I know for a fact that at the start of the year, at the start of the decade, West Ham 2010 were 17th, but to finish the year, West Ham are currently 17th. It's been a tough decade. It's been a tough decade. We start off with the first game of the weekend, which is the Steve Sidwell derby as Brighton take on Chelsea. Now, I believe this is the third game in a row Brighton are in the early kickoff for the matches, and no, I have no idea why Brighton have got that luxury either. I should point out the times are a bit weird for these games because this is a day where BT are covering all the games, so there's pretty much segregated evenly between 12:30, 3 o'clock, and 5:30. There's no clear outright time slot for these games, so this is one of 3 games at 12:30, but because it's alphabetical, this is the first one we're going to cover. So Brighton, both teams coming off wins. Brighton's being a 2-0 home win against Bournemouth. Meanwhile, Chelsea coming off a comeback win at the Emirates to win 2-1. With regards to their head-to-head side, I mean, there's no contest when it comes to the previous meetings. And the most recent one, Chelsea in September won 2-0 at Stamford Bridge, but Chelsea have actually won all of their Premier League encounters with Brighton, which are 5. So it does not look good for the Brighton, but it looks very nice for Chelsea. Brighton overall, they are playing at home, which is where they've been best this year. 4 wins from 10, and they is responsible for most of the reason why they are currently where they are in the league. Meanwhile, Chelsea, their away form has been what is best for them so far. 7 wins from 10, with only 3 losses, all season. As for this game, it is actually very hard to call. It is very hard to call. Because despite Chelsea's win against Arsenal, they have been struggling against sides in the lower half of the league, mainly at home. But you got to say they've struggled against these sides like Southampton, Bournemouth, even Everton away recently as well, when they were in a bit of a relegation issue. As for Brighton, they are playing some of their best football at the moment. Only 2 losses in their last 6, which is a good record to have. So overall, actually, I believe that with the quick turnover, with the fact Brighton had an extra day to prepare, I believe that this is going to be one of the shocks of New Year. Brighton are going to pull off the win at home against Chelsea. I'm going to say this one's going to end 2-1. We now move on to the Matthew Lowton derby as Burnley take on Aston Villa. Both teams coming off losses at the weekend. Burnley's being a 2-0 home loss to Manchester United. Meanwhile, Aston Villa losing 3-0 at home to 10-man Watford. As for the history between the two sides, they have played each other 3 times in the Premier League in recent years. Burnley, 2 of them ending in draws, 1 of them ending in a Burnley win. The most recent encounter being a 2-2 draw at Villa Park in September. I'm not going to say when they all are because this is just the reverse fixtures of previous fixtures, so they will all literally be in the same month. I'm not going to tell you when they all are. That would be slightly annoying for me and for you. When it comes to the form of the sides, Burnley are doing their best stuff at home, winning 50% of their games only. However, they have lost the subsequent 5, so 5 wins, 5 losses at home. Meanwhile, Aston Villa only 1 win out of their last 6, playing some of their worst up, and they are also away where they've only won 1 game, all season. As for this game, I believe Burnley have lost their last 2 now. They don't usually go too long without a win coming along. And as for Villa, they are playing some of their worst football of the season so far, and are in big trouble. They potentially do get out of the relegation zone with a win here, but I don't see them getting a win or even a draw. I believe Burnley will come and win at Turf Moor. This will be 2-0 to Burnley. We now move on to the Jose Perez derby as Newcastle take on Leicester. Newcastle coming off a 2-1 loss at home to the new Carlo Ancelotti Everton. Meanwhile, Leicester reserves are coming off a win against West Ham away. It's not even an insult to Leicester; it's an insult to us. I'm still annoyed. I'm glad it's what it's led to. As for the recent history between the two sides, Newcastle would want to forget the last game as it was a 5-0 thrashing at the King Power, and it, believe me, could have been a lot more for Leicester. They were absolutely rampant, and somehow that wasn't even their biggest score. That hasn't even been their biggest thrashing of the season. When Southampton play Leicester at the King Power, oh boy. Overall, though, in recent years, Leicester have won 3 of the last 9 meetings, with Newcastle 6 of the last 9 meetings, with 6 of the last 8. There has also been no draws between the two sides of the Premier League, so this is another one of those ones where they've apparently got it's one of those no draw gods has bestowed upon this game. And once again, if you're doing that, then you should really get your priorities straight. As for the game itself, I believe that at the end of the day, Leicester are playing incredible football, and most of their starting 11, like Vardy, Sonucci, Pereira, and Chilwell, will all be probably back for this game, as their following game is a cup game where they probably won't play them. Meanwhile, Newcastle coming off a loss, the quick turnover where they played most of their starting 11 anyway, it's going to be hard to see them getting anything against this Leicester side. So I'm going to say Leicester are going to win 3-1 at St James's Park. We now move on to the 3 o'clock kickoffs, where the first one is the Victor Wanyama derby as Southampton take on Spurs. Now, I know, and Spurs fans, I know, the most famous player to come from both of your clubs is Gareth Bale. But these derby names are for fun, so I'm going to say Victor Wanyama. just to partly annoy you Spurs fans. Both sides coming off draws at the weekend. Southampton's being a 1-1 draw at home to Crystal Palace. Meanwhile, Spurs coming off a 2-2 draw away to Norwich. When it comes to the form of the two sides and the history, Spurs have won 6 of the last 10 meetings between the two sides. Southampton only winning 2 games out of the last 10, only 1 of the last 7. But one thing these sides have got in common is not their league position, it is their form at the respected places they're playing. For Southampton at home, they have only won 2 games out of 10 at home, those being back-to-back wins against Norwich and Watford. Meanwhile, Spurs only winning 2 games away all season, them being to Wolves and West Ham. So neither side has been playing well at the respected places they are playing, if that makes sense. So Spurs away, Southampton at home. You get it. You're smart. Actually, I know some of my viewers aren't. Never mind. As for this game, despite Southampton's recent run of form, I believe Spurs are going to look to rectify that poor performance against Norwich, and they seem like a side. They do usually play quite well against Southampton, especially around this time of year. So I believe this would be one of Mourinho's most comfortable wins. As Spurs manager, and I believe that Spurs will win this one 2-0, and yes, it's only by 2, and that is actually going to be one of the most comfortable wins, scoreline wise, for Spurs. We now move on to the teams in yellow that begin with W. As Watford take on Wolves, I really struggled for a name for the derby name. Wolves don't even play in yellow. I just had to think of something that linked. And also, look, the most famous player that played for both these sides was around in 1909. So don't even lie, you would have not heard of him. You would have not heard of that player. Watford coming off a win against Aston Villa, 3-0 at home. Meanwhile, Wolves coming off a loss to Liverpool at Anfield. With regards to the history between the two sides, it's odd as evens when it comes to the last 4 meetings. between the two. Watford have won 2, Wolves have won 2. Obviously, the most famous meeting recently was the FA Cup semi-final, where Watford came from 2 goals down to win 3-2 and get to the FA Cup final. It's best for them that we don't talk about what happened in the final. And also, fun fact, Watford were Wolves' first victory of the season in the 28th of September. And yes, they are 7th despite winning their first game late in September. That is quite impressive from Wolves. But you've got to say, Watford have been on a renaissance of form recently under Nigel Pearson, losing only 1 in their last 5. Meanwhile, Wolves in the same time only 2 recent losses since the 22nd of September. They have only lost 2 games all season. In that time period, so that is very impressive. Overall, I believe that Watford at home will give them help they require to pull out a result that they need to. I'm not going to say they're going to win because Wolves are a very good side, but I believe that this will be a score draw, and I'm going to say 1-1. We now move on to the Jack Rodwell derby as Man City take on Everton at 5:30. Man City's both sides coming off wins. Everton's being a 2-1 away win to Newcastle. Meanwhile, Man City beating Sheffield United 2-0 at home. With regards to the history between the two sides, the last time these two sides met, Man City ran out 3-1 winners and have actually won 4 of the last 10 games between the two sides. Everton have only won once in those last 2, but it was that 4-0 win against in Pep Guardiola's first season. So it was an impressive win, but it's still only 1 win. Man City have also won the previous 4 games, most of them by a score of 3-1. So and look, when it comes to the form of the two sides, Man City have won 7 of the last of their 10 home games, a record you'd expect from Manchester City. Meanwhile, Everton have only won 2 of their last of the 10 home games they've played this year, but obviously the most recent one being on Saturday. As for the game itself, I believe that I've said recently, Ancelotti plays a style of football where they have a lot of shots, but against Newcastle they also conceded a lot of shots. And if you concede a lot of shots against Manchester City, you are going to get punished. If I'm not sure 3 days is enough to change that, so I believe that this will be a high-scoring game, and this will be an entertaining game. Usually high-scoring games are entertaining. I've just realised. I can't remember people saying a 5-5 was ever boring. That is what I'm predicting. I'm predicting 3-2 to Manchester City. We now move on to the Cameron Jerome derby as Norwich take on Crystal Palace. Both sides coming off draws. Norwich is being a 2-2 draw at home to Tottenham. Meanwhile, Palace 1-1 against Southampton. With regards to the history between the two sides, Palace won the last game 2-0 at Selhurst Park and have won 3 of the last 5 meetings between the two sides, winning the last 3. Norwich are coming off a recent spell of good form. They haven't necessarily got the points, only 3 points of their last 7 games, but are coming off good performances against the likes of Leicester, Tottenham and Arsenal. So they are on the up slightly. They still need that illustrious win to get their season back on track, though, and whether they'll get it at home or not is yet to be seen. They've only won 2 games of their last 10, but at home is where they have played better overall. As for Crystal Palace away, they have been relatively comfortable, but they have only won 3 games of 10, and most of their losses have come away from home this season. As for this game, I believe that despite Norwich's good form, Palace play such a defensive style that Norwich's attacking will be susceptible to Palace's counter-attack many occasions, especially with Wilfried Zaha. He could definitely cause the Norwich defence some big trouble. So despite Norwich's good form, and I believe they probably will play well again tomorrow, I believe that this will be Palace's to win. It will be 1-0 to Crystal Palace. We now move on to the Eddie Howe derby. Oh, sorry, not the Eddie Howe derby. I did these derby names before the new manager was announced. It's the Jack Wilshere derby as West Ham take on Bournemouth at 5:30 in David Moyes' I want to say first game in charge back, because his first game in charge was actually against Watford. Let's not talk about the result in that game, but it was against Watford. Both sides coming off losses. Shock. One of them was West Ham. With West Ham losing 2-1 to Leicester reserves at home. Meanwhile, Bournemouth losing 2-0 away to Brighton. Both sides dwindling near the bottom of the table. 17th place, 16th in this one. So it's a must-win game for both teams. The history between the two sides. Bournemouth, since going up to the Premier League, have actually had West Ham's number. They've won 4 of the last 9 games. West Ham only winning 2, and Bournemouth have actually not lost in their last 6 meetings between the two sides. With the most recent one being a 2-2 draw at the Vitality Stadium. Unfortunately, it was for West Ham. It was the game where Lucas Fabianski got injured, and it was also the game where pretty much the last of our hopes were crushed. The last time we actually had hope, of actually doing anything this season. As for this game, it's very hard to know what to predict for this one as a West Ham fan, because I do have faith in Moyes. I genuinely do. But at the same time, he's only had 3 days to work with the side. And it's hard to make your impact in that short span of time. So in all honesty, from that perspective alone, if we ended up losing this game to Bournemouth but played a better style, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, just from the fact that Moyes has only had 3 days to change things around. However, from every other aspect, the fact that this is a team close to us in the table, from the fact that we haven't won at home since September, from the fact that we need to get away from the relegation battle that we are currently in, this is a must-win game. This isn't necessarily a must-win game from the future of Moyes, because it's his first game in charge. This is a must-win game for the club and for everyone surrounding the club. But on the same side, you could say that this is a must-win game for Bournemouth as well, because they don't want to be around this area. And with 1 win out of their last 7, they need to improve themselves. So it's a must-win game for everyone around that club as well. Overall, there's going to be a bit of bias in this prediction. I believe that I'm going to be confident enough to predict West Ham are just going to win. I believe the changing manager will have an influence and actually bring a bit of positivity around the club. Despite it being Moyes, I do think they'll be positive, and Moyes in some ways does need this win to bring a few fans that are doubters on his side. So I believe this will be a 2-1 win to West Ham. We now move on to the late kickoff, which is the 8 o'clock kickoff. Arsenal versus Man United in the Robin van Persie derby. Sorry, Arsenal fans. So who else was I going to put? Who else was I going to put? Seriously. Arsenal coming off another loss, this one being Chelsea, 2-1 loss. Meanwhile, Man United coming off a back-to-back win, this one being against Burnley to put them in 5th in the table. Meanwhile, Arsenal down in 12th, which is an incredible thing to think at the turn of the new year. As for the history between the two sides, because they have a lot of history. The most recent game ended at Old Trafford 2-2. 1-2, sorry, that is my mistake. And the last 10 fixtures between the two sides have been pretty even. Arsenal winning 3, Man United winning 4, 3 draws in between. But all Arsenal's wins have come at home, which could potentially help them in this scenario. However, though, at home, despite them winning more home games than away games, they've won 3 home games. They haven't won a home game since October the 6th against Bournemouth, which is an incredibly damning stat. Man United, on the other hand, have actually been playing decent at home, despite only winning 3 of their last 10, winning 2 of their last 3 away games this season. Yes, the loss was against Watford, but it's still an improvement. As for this game, you got to admit, despite Arsenal losing, once again, they did look a lot better under Mikel Arteta against Chelsea. So I believe that this will be where he gets points at home. It's not going to be necessarily the win he wants, because Man United are playing relatively decent football at the moment. But I believe this will be another score draw. It'll be like the reverse fixture this season. It will be 1-1. We now move on to the Thursday kickoff. at 8 p.m. again, as it's the We Love Playing Away derby as Liverpool take on Sheffield United. Again, I couldn't find a player, and annoyingly, if Sheffield United had just beaten City, this would be the unbeaten or away derby. And yes, I know Liverpool don't mind playing home or away. It's just these two sides have probably the best away records out of anyone this season when it comes to the amount of losses. So that is the We Love Playing Away derby. Liverpool come off another win. I mean, he's surprised. This one being against Wolves 1-0 at Anfield. Meanwhile, Sheffield United coming off their first loss away from home, being a 2-0 loss to Manchester City. The last time these two sides met, it was very interesting. Sheffield United, Liverpool only winning 1-0 through a Dean Henderson mistake. Sheffield United could have easily come out of that game with a win, even a draw. A draw, even a win, potentially. So this game will be very, very tight. Obviously, as I've said, Sheffield United lost their first away game this week, but and yes, they have only won 3 out of 10 away games, but they are resilient away, and that could definitely help them against a side like Liverpool. But it's a Liverpool side that have won every single home game this season, the best home record, obviously. So they're coming up a very, very hard opponent here, which is why they're top of the league at the end of the day. As for this game, I believe that Sheffield United will put up another valiant fight, and Liverpool potentially could draw this, potentially could lose this. I genuinely believe that about Sheffield United's ability, but I'm not going to say that they will lose this or draw this. They are going to win this. It will be tight. It will be 2-1 to Liverpool. So that is all the games for this week. Let's take a look at my fantasy team, and I've made no transfers this week. I am confident in the side. I've got Schmeichel, but I've made some substitutions. I've got Schmeichel in goal, Robertson, Sonucci, and Kelly at the back. Traore, De Bruyne, Mane, and Grealish in midfield. Abraham, Vardy, and Aubameyang up top. Vardy as captain. On the bench, Dunk, Lundstram, and Dendoncker. Lundstram's been dropped for 2 reasons. 1, he's playing Liverpool, and 2, he's got a slight ankle injury. So for anyone with Lundstram in, which there's a load of you, potentially get him on the bench, or not. That would help me out if you're in my league and keep him in, and he doesn't play. And Dunk, despite I believe them beating Chelsea, they will potentially concede. So that's why he is sitting this one out on the bench. So that is my thoughts on the fantasy team. That is my fantasy team this week. I do believe there's some nice fixtures for teams in my league this week. My team, nice fixtures for the players in my team. Sorry, there we go. I got that out eventually. And I believe that this could be another high-scoring week for me. So that will do it for the predictions. And for this week's video. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you like, share, and subscribe. And I should point out, obviously there will be a review video coming out on Friday for this week, but obviously there will be a week off due to FA Cup. I'm not going to review the FA Cup. I don't have that. You already think these videos are long. You already think these videos are long enough. I'm not doing like 24 games, and also I'm not going to review the likes of what are the games? 2 championship sides. I'm only doing it to do Premier League. So that, obviously, week off after review video, and I will see you on Friday for that.